Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and today we're going to look at the War Within beta dev notes from this week. A little bit late on this video, sorry about that, and if you're interested in the Shaman portion of this, patch notes, that has already been made into a video, came out yesterday. I'll put a link thing up in the top right, and you can go watch that, but we'll look at all of the other classes and stuff. Starting off with DK, we have a little bit of a change to Rider of the Apocalypse, where they're shifting some value out of refunding a rune and into just damage from your runic power abilities while you have 2 or more horsemen active. Not a huge change to that tree. We also have some changes to Sand Lane here. They're soft capping the Blood is Life beyond 8 targets, and it can no longer crit. Corrupted Blood ability of the Blood Beast deals reduced damage beyond 8 targets as well. Essence of the Blood Queen's haste has been reduced to 1% per stack. Vampiric Strike also is going to heal for less. Its damage been reduced, so nerfs to Sand Lane here. Sand Lane for Unholy in particular was doing some pretty big damn. I'm not sure if... I think it still maybe does as well. These are not massive nerfs, but in particular it does look like they're targeting the big AoE, which was an area that Sand Lane Unholy was exceptionally strong in. I expect still is as well, but haven't looked at recent logs or anything like that since this build has come up. Frost. We have some changes as well. Icy Death Torrent is being buffed by 100% and soft capped at 8 targets. It's now scaling with Mastery as well. That's always nice. Always weird whenever you have some abilities that don't scale with Mastery. I mean, it's weird because, Mastery is more interesting as a stat the more, it only affects some parts of your kit. But then that always creates really annoying tensions and makes certain abilities just feel bad or, not feel particularly viable depending on the tuning in any given tier and as you get more stats across your character. So in general, I think it's probably good. Masteries tend to be better the more they're just like a flat damage increase for all of your stuff, right? But then, of course, they're less interesting. So that's the trade-off. And it now has a 50% chance to trigger on auto attack crits while dual wielding, and 100% if you're using a two-hander as well. Pillar of Frost has been buffed in the amount of strength, and Enduring Strength has also been buffed. Long Winter now extends Pillar of Frost by 2 seconds up to 3 times for a maximum of 6 seconds. Shattering Blade now increases Frost Strike damage by 125%, so mostly Frost DK buffs here. Shattered Frost now causes Frost Strike to deal 65%, up from 50. Hyperprexia's Trance to Trigger has been increased to 35%, I assume, and deals 45% additional damage, was 30. Rage of the Frozen Champion's runic power generated from Howling Blast reduced to 6, so this is a nerf. And Smothering Offense now increases auto attack damage by 10%, was 6%. So mostly buffs to Frost DK. Small, tiny nerf in RP gen from Rage of the Frozen Champion. Unholy, on the other hand, we just have 15% nerfs, primarily to... I guess it's to large parts of the kit here. Epidemic going to be a big one here for AoE, but also Scourge Strike, Clawing Shadows, the Magus of the Dead, the Apocalypse Ghouls, the Festering Wounds as well. So large parts of the kit here for Unholy getting nerfed. Again, this was a spec that was doing big damn in the last few weeks build, so I'm not surprised to see them targeting Unholy and Sand Lane for a little bit of a down tick. I still wouldn't read too much into, like, if you look at my PTR testing videos, if you go and watch a stream, I still think it's a bit early to be thinking too much. If you're trying to ask yourself, what do I want to play in War Within? Oh, I know. I'm going to go watch and see what's at the top of the damage meters on people doing keys streams or in raid testing. I still think it's early to be doing that. I think that you can't be doing that until right at the end of the beta, and even then you have to adjust for there will be further changes when this stuff actually comes out. So I think that the most useful stuff you can be doing now is looking at it in terms of what are these playstyles like? Are there playstyles that I'm interested in? Are there fundamentals of a spec that are guaranteeing it a raid spot that means that it's going to be valuable for me to play it because nobody else in my guild is? Those sorts of questions. But if you're somebody who just wants to be playing something that's flavor of the month, you have to wait until closer to the time of the actual, patch coming out, the expansion coming out. All right, anyways, let's move on to Druid. We have some changes to Elun's Chosen here. These are just buffs, just numbers buffs to Elun's Chosen. We also have a slight buff to Keeper of the Grove, a little bit more astral power on that, not a huge deal. We also have some nerfs here to Wild Stalker, including bursting growth damage and vigorous creepers and thriving growth as well, causing less Bloodseeker vines. This is obviously overall a throughput nerf to Wild Stalker. also removes a little bit of the gameplay of the spec. There are a lot of hero talent trees that are pretty, slotted in and forget about it. Wildstalker was one of the trees that did offer you quite a substantial reward for, especially as Feral, for playing it correctly, for, making sure you were biting the correct target, was the main skill expression of that tree. That's still going to be the right way to play it, but they are reducing the importance of doing that. They're reducing the value from doing that. And potentially they're making this not even as good as just playing Druid of the Claw, potentially. So, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think having a few hero talent trees that are actually kind of gameplay intensive, as long as the other ones for the same specs are simpler, would be better than if they were all super simple and all super, the way that many of them operate now is like it dictates a few of your talent choices, but it doesn't really offer you any gameplay to actually think about. And I think that's fine for most of them, but I do think a few of them, with some actual gameplay oomph added in that you can opt into, right? Like, obviously, if you don't want to, you could just play Druid of the Claw, or you could just play Keeper of the Grove, right? But I think that would be my preferred universe. So I would like to see Wildstalker indexed more into that rather than less. But it looks like they're going the opposite direction with it. Balance, we have a 1-point Astral Smolders being turned into a 1-pointer, although not quite with this build. And then we have nerf to Wild Surges, buff to Stellar Flare, buff to Stellar Amplification, buff to Umbral Intensity, but a nerf to Umbral Embrace. So I would describe these as looks like more buffs than nerfs, but there are definitely a few nerfs scattered within here. Orbit Breaker is going to be calling down full moons substantially more often as well. That's definitely nice as well. And all ability damage reduced by 5%. That's just a numbers nerf there as well. That potentially is the biggest one here overall. And then finally, a little change for Feral, which is that Convoke is going to try and put its single target abilities on your current target. Same for Moonkin here as well. It'll try and cast those Star Surges and those full moons on your current target, which I'm not sure if Convoke has had this functionality before where it cared about what your target was. I feel like it would just kind of throw things out randomly. Although maybe the Wraths and stuff that it spent were always on the primary target. I'm not sure. Either way, now it will function such that, the main single target damage spells it might cast, 2 or 3 of the casts that it does, will dump into your primary target, which is nice. That's nice. That's much nicer than, say, a random target for those, which is what it used to be. All right, Hunter, we have a cooldown reduction on Implosive Trap, which is a bit of a weird trap. Functioning kind of weird in beta right now, where... Actually, let me see if I can pull up the video somebody put in my guild Discord of what this was doing. No, okay, it must have been a different channel. I can't see it, but it's doing some weird stuff where, like, I don't know. It seems to be a little bit buggy, basically, on beta. It's affecting mobs that are far away from the trap when it actually is getting triggered. SETI Shot's getting a little bit of a cast time buff. Marksmanship, we're getting single target buffs to Arcane Shot, Aim Shot, Rapid Fire, and there also is a large buff here. Penetrating Shots is being doubled in terms of how much crit damage bonus it's going to give you. There is an effectiveness nerf to Trick Shots, although, given that Aim Shot and Rapid Fire are going up by 10%, baseline, even when they're Trick Shots, I think that they're going to be doing more damage, right? Survival, Mongoose Fury has been reverted to the previous functionality, so they talked about this a little bit. There was a Survival blue post where they were basically like, okay, I think this was last week. We talked about this in one of the previous patch notes vids. Survival had Tip of the Spear and Mongoose Fury that had a great deal of tension with each other, because one of them makes you want to press Mongoose Bite, and one of them makes you want to weave in kill commands. And so what they tried with the previous build was like, okay, we're going to turn Mongoose Fury into a standard maintenance buff rather than the kind of special style of add stacks but don't increase duration buff that it was. And they're reverting that because I guess it was too iconic to Survival, and I think that's good. I think it was a cool and iconic part of the rotation. They have a new way to resolve the tension between Tip of the Spear and Mongoose Fury now, which is called Bloody Claws, and that says kill command extends the duration of Mongoose Fury by 1.5 seconds. So now if you're in a spot where you want to be doing kill commands and Mongoose Bites, now you just compress the kill command and you'll extend your Mongoose Fury and you'll still get the Mongoose Bites in. So that's nice. They've also reverted the Flanking Strike change. Flanking Strike briefly was proccing, or was like every 3 kill commands, your next kill command was instead of Flanking Strike. That was how it worked last week's build. They're turning it back into what it used to be, so... that is the changes to survival. Mage, we have some nerfs to Spell Slinger and some proc chance reductions as well. Arcane. Now, Arcane, they've nerfed Barrage. They've nerfed Orb. They've nerfed Blast. They also removed Chrono Shift, RIP in peace. They baked in Mana Adept, which is getting mana refund when you barrage per charge. They've also updated Evocation as well. They also buffed Arcane Missile's base damage by 20%, and they buffed Ether Attunement by a load as well, up to 150% increased damage on primary target, and 100 on nearby enemies, was 150 respectively. The results of this have been that currently in the last raid testing that we did on this build, Arcane was the best single target DPS by far, great cleave as well. So I expect that there will be some large nerfs to this spec in future builds. But yeah, right now, Missiles is a huge chunk of your damage. It's like your top damage with the build right now. So we'll see what changes with Arcane next week. It certainly won't continue to be in the state that it's in. Although maybe they'll be happy with the builds and just reduce the numbers. It does seem like there's kind of just one build and all the talents are kind of similar-ish at the bottom of the tree. So there may be some room for another week of a long set of mage changes again, because I kind of feel like Arcane is in a bit of a worse space now than it was like 3 beta builds ago, but I'm not sure. Fire, we have a little bit of buff to Pyroblast, and Frost, we have buffs to Flurry, Frostbolt, and Ice Lance. Fire's doing okay on beta right now. Frost, not so much, so I expect numbers to maybe go up for these specs and down for Arcane. Monk, we have a nerf to Elixir of Determination, down to 50% of recently purified damage. This was a very, very powerful effect. I'm not surprised to see it nerfed. I'm not sure if 50% was the right number. That's a big nerf, but that may well be fair. Here's a big one. Paladin. Retribution Aura has been removed. Developers note, as part of our process of examining raid buffs, we've come to the decision to remove Ret Aura in order to reduce restrictions on group compositions. We believe that the utility options additional paladins are able to bring is sufficiently valuable without becoming oppressive. So this basically, when Retribution Aura was added in Dragonflight, it moved the raid from 1 paladin is required for Devotion Aura to 2 paladins are required, 1 for Retribution Aura and 1 for Devotion Aura. And ideally that second paladin, or at least one of your paladins, would not be a Holy Paladin because they tend to not want to Aura Mastery Ret Aura, right? They want to Aura Mastery Devo Aura. So now we're going back to a world of 1 paladin is required. Devo Aura is the only aura that is, a raid buff anymore. Paladin kind of being brought in line with all the other classes as a result. I think this is good. I think Paladin, I think that every class having 1 raid buff is okay. That's an okay place for us to be. Anything that moves us in that direction, so classes going from 0 to 1, classes going from 2 to 1, is good. I would be happy if all classes went from 1 to 0 as well, or if they added in stuff like scrolls to let you get some value, to let you get 80% of the value of a raid buff without actually having that class, 70% of the value of the raid buff, those sorts of things. But failing any of those kind of big changes happening, moving everybody towards 1 raid buff is something I'll celebrate. So I was happy when Shamans went from 0 to 1, and I'm happy when Paladins go from 2 to 1. And this Paladin spot, people will think of it as a Holy Paladin spot, but it's actually not. It can be any Paladin. Holy Paladin's Aura Mastery on Devo Aura is good, obviously, but that is still like, it's sort of, you get the same thing from Barrier, right? You get the same thing from effects like that. So from Spirit Link Totem, especially now with Spouting Spirits available for it for extra damage reduction. So yeah, we're going to be back into a world of 1 Paladin being sort of mandatory, the second ones and third ones not being as important anymore, not really bringing any important aura. Although the developers think that utility options additional paladins bring, it is certainly true that paladins do bring utility, and that is a class that sometimes the second one is nice. It's pretty rare that you really are like, oh, we need a second Lay on Hands or a second Bubble, a second Bop. There have been examples of it, though. Scale Commander Sarkareth is a great example of a fight where a second Paladin actually adds quite a lot of extra options for how you can deal with the third phase. I remember my guild, we had to do quite a bit of cooking to figure out how we were going to yoink a strat that had a Rep Paladin and play it without a Rep Paladin in our guild. So it does, of the classes that this is true for, I think Paladin's definitely pretty high up on the list for ones where you'd maybe bring a second one because you want some utility out of them, rather than just because it's the best throughput option for your last few raid spots that don't need to be raid buffs. They've replaced Auras of Swift Vengeance with Crusader Aura, which makes sense because Auras of Swift Vengeance used to just grant Ret Aura and Crusader Aura. Ret is also getting some changes here. Expurgation is going to last a little bit longer. Templar Strikes now only has 1 charge, but strike damage is going up and slash damage is going way up. And an issue has been fixed as well. Priest, we have a little change here. Void Weaver is now having Entropic Rift properly scale up its damage when it grows from casting Penance or Devouring Plague, but the base damage has been reduced as well there. So I'm not sure whether this is a net buff or nerf. I mean, obviously this part's a bug fix, but I don't know how much of the damage that Entropic Rift was supposed to be doing was being munched by this bug existing. Shaman changes, as mentioned. I have a video out on these already, so a lot of stuff to cover in that. The TLDR there is that Shamans are now a required 1. You need to bring 1 Shaman. It can be any flavor. My suspicion is that Elemental will be the default way to do it, but Restoration probably the second most likely option, and Enhancement, as of right now at least, would be my guess to be the least likely, least common. Over the next, say, 10 raid tiers, I would guess that the Shaman raid buff gets brought least frequently by Enhancement, but of course, still plenty of time for those sorts of things to change, and on any given tier, it's going to be tuning dependent. Warlock. So Hellcaller has had some redesign here to Zalan's Cruelty and Zalan's Ferocity, which are basically just being redesigned for clarity purposes, as it was unclear that Shadow Flame effect should benefit from both damage increases and both crit chance increases, and these just give you, you know, extra crit from all sources and damage for your shadow spells and fire spells, and of course, any Shadow Flame spells you may happen to have will get both. Demo, there's some talent movement stuff here, but the big thing is Felguards now charge when you use Soul Strike, which was functionality that used to exist, that it lost when it became a pet ability rather than a player ability, so that's nice. Warrior, we have a small nerf to Fierce Follow Through here. Slayer still looking very good. Fury Slayer still looking very good. Arms, Blade Master's Torment now giving you 8 seconds of sweeping strikes instead of the full duration, but this is now much more quality of life because it will be added to existing sweeping strikes, or if you press sweeping strikes, it will be added to those 8 seconds, similar to the other Warrior Torment talents, and this tooltip will be updated later. Finally, Fury, we have buffs to Rampage and Raging Blow, increased Raging Blow self cooldown reset chance on improved Raging Blow, nerfs to Bloodthirst, nerfs to Odin's Fury, massive nerfs actually to Crushing Force, because not only are they nerfing it by more than half, but it was also providing double the percent it was supposed to in the previous build, so huge nerfs to Crushing Force there, like 80% nerf to that effect. And then Reckless Abandon also getting nerfed for Bloodbath by a lot, and Crushing Blow for a little. Fury still looking very strong on the beta right now, though. And then we also have some PvP stuff happening there, which we don't usually cover in here, but mostly Shaman PvP stuff as PvP talents have moved in and out of the PvE trees. There's some replacements happening there. All right, that is it for the patch notes this week. Overall, I think things are moving in a pretty good direction here. There are a few things on my wish list for kind of moderate to large reworks going forward. I think Aldrachi Reaver, Lightsmith, Pack Leader, maybe Dark Ranger as well are some hero talent trees I would really love to see, like maybe a medium-sized rethink of for how all of those, you know, function, how they feel. Maybe also some of the Shaman hero talents. Some of the Shaman hero talents are weird because they're really fun for one of the specs and kind of weird for the other. So that is another thing they could maybe look at, especially now that they've reworked Shaman a little bit. And then as far as the specs go, I would say I think they're approaching reasonably good places. Of course, you know, I think Enhance getting a little bit more love would be cool. Getting a little bit of cool stuff, given that everybody else kind of is, and they sort of just got Wind Fury yoinked from them. That could be cool. But overall, I think it's approaching a point now where we're kind of hitting the tail end of the reworks and the design side and moving into that tuning side of the beta. And I think it's in a pretty good place right now. There's not a lot that I'm like worried about. And there's a lot of really good change. Like a lot of the stuff they've been cooking with, you know, survival, for instance, the mages, all that kind of stuff, I think has been really intelligent and there are things in a lot of these specs that I'm pretty excited to play around with. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Of course, I will continue to make these videos as they continue to do these dev notes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.